16,000.
So, of the 11 synthesizers I own,
11.
two of which, one of which is sitting there, needs a key done yet, but it's a big 88 key. Well, it's not actually synth, just keyboard. And the other one's my FA08, which is actually a church right now, which is an 88 key, weighted keyboard. This is the heaviest one I own.
Sure, that's funny.
But it is like industrial metal.
Well, on the clip that you made, don't you show one that somebody destroyed on?
Oh yeah, and like the key bed's destroyed.
But you can see all the metal and the framing of it. It's for real. It's for real made to stand up.
Oh yeah, it was the keyboard player for what, 9 Inch Nails.
I think that's what you said in the video. Yeah.
It's God, what's the guy's name now? I'm drawing total blank. Well, I'll put it in the bottom here or something like that. But it's it's like the guy would buy these things for nothing and just trash them on stage. But you'd look at the picture of that one I found online.
Sure.
And I'm like, I could fix that. It just needs a new keyboard. He probably cracked the plastic screen here.
Sorry, I didn't have it running. Technical difficulties, please stand by.
Should we do an introduction again?
I just shrink down so I look better.
Hi guys, welcome back to Three Old Tech Dudes.
Hey.
Today we're going to talk about the fascinating Yamaha DX7 synthesizer. Our resident synthesizer fan is especially Nathan. I think, Justin, you have some interest at least, don't you? So,
Yeah, Nathan kind of inspired me to get back into it again.
I love music. I love music, but I'm not a keys player yet in my life. Maybe before I'm dead.
He did actually put up a post. It was this week, wasn't it? Were you practicing the trumpet?
The trumpet, yes.
Yeah. And that was pretty good. I liked it because they clamped it to the front.
Because
of the
I'm brave, I'll put the post, the link below, and you can make fun of me incessantly. I enjoyed playing though. We had a really big band event at my high school. It was an alumni event last night, and I'm still coming down from the fun of that. That was a blast.
Still stoked. Oh yeah,
it was sweet. So
maybe
we'll put videos of that below too, because I'm going to put that together.
Yeah, we'll try and put a link to some of this stuff either down in the description or maybe in a box somewhere.
Absolutely.
There, I don't know. It's one of those things I got to kind of figure out where I'm going to do it because at some point those boxes they're really big. And like, okay, whose face am I going to block this time?
Sure.
Yeah, so that has its problems. So anyway, I'm trying to join there it is. I have all the information on this on Google Drive. And this was set up to run my mixer, which is the Behringer XR18. But it'd be nice to be able to read the information on this again, because as much as I love playing this thing, and I really do, because one of my favorites, of course, is the piano. And we've got a little speaker in the back there, so we can hear. Because if we didn't, it'd just go in the mixer, we wouldn't be able to hear it. Which would be somewhat ineffective. Oh, come on, where'd I put it?
Waiting on Nathan.
Yeah, it's just bad. There it is, Google Docs.
Let's go wait on it to load. We stopped too early. That ain't right.
No, it's not.
There you go. It says DX7. Okay. So, just some ding.
There's our first license or content violation.
Yeah.
You can use 30 seconds, right?
Yeah, it's not even close, but anyway. Okay. So, some basic information on this. The thing was actually made from 1983 to 1989. This particular one is the first version. They had from 83 to about 85, this was the version produced, and then they had the DX7-2, the DX7S, and and I can't remember the other models. I'll put those at the bottom here. But so this is the original one. This is the original 1983, and this one is actually a 1983 production year unit. I looked up the serial number.
That's really cool.
So it is one of the first ones. So of course it's pretty neat. So I did a few upgrades to this that honestly anyone that owns one of these is usually done is backlight the LCD, because if you don't, you're like, I think I can see that. But they had the LED number in here, which I'm hoping that camera's catching. If not, I'll put a still up now. But the LED number would tell you which patch you were on, but you had no idea what it was named. Mm-hmm. So the LCD, of course, would tell you. And then today, or in the day when this thing was made, how can I explain? So, some real neat things on this. First of all, this is not the first FM synthesizer ever. Okay, that actually probably goes to either the Yamaha DX7, I think is what it was, which is a really big, very, very expensive thing, or the the other one. I'll put the model down here, but it's another one. But it was like one of the Synclavier. The Synclavier, I think, actually did FM. It came out like just before this.
Okay.
But here's the price difference. A Synclavier would set you back at about $100,000. This thing, yeah, that's it. So you can either buy that or a house in 1982.
So if you hear one of those on a recording, you know the man put up some money. Okay.
Yeah, and you do. You hear that on some early Michael Jackson stuff. That was when he finally kind of broke out into his own world. Mm-hmm. So the first thing was like, it wasn't bad. It was the one before that, Billie Jean.
Billie Jean, I was on Thriller. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. So that used the Synclavier. Now live, they went to the DX7 mainly because $2,000 or $100,000.
Right.
This thing also weighed amazingly less.
Sure.
And it sounded identically to it because the way it worked was the same. Now Yamaha actually owns the patent for FM synthesis, which is now, of course, since run out. But
sure.
But in the day, Synclavier licensed that from Yamaha.
Brought something production first, so to speak.
Yeah.
I'm not aware of that.
So, yeah, when this thing came out, of course, FM synthesis is a huge difference from analog. So, analog synthesis, you have your oscillators and you have filters and you have envelopes and things like that. And this has some of that. It does have an envelope set up there. Mm-hmm. But the way this works is that this was... You kind of had to think in reverse. So if you wanted an organ, which an organ is a great one to use as an example because it's really just a stack of basically unmodified oscillators. So, because it really is just, that's how an organ works. They're very simple, they're basic, just basic tones. They're not modified like square waves or anything else. Okay. So you would have to think about that, and then you had your algorithm, your actual algorithms. I swear I can talk today.
Algorithms.
To determine what you want to do. So you're on an organ, you would use number 32 because it's really just 6 oscillators. So the way this is, you have your oscillators, and then you have, which are sine wave only in this one. So you have oscillators or operators, and then you have your modifiers, which are other oscillators or other operators that have been turned to be able to modify the original one. So if you looked at an organ patch, which is here, like this one, right? So so that uses, if you go into function, portamento time.
It's a little different than a Casio.
Oh my!
It's amazing how much you had to know about your equipment back in the earlier days of electronics like this.
Yeah. So algorithms like this is algorithm 32, which is this one. Mm-hmm. So it's just 6 operators. Or 6 oscillators stacked, and that's what it is.
So this reminds me, I've seen a documentary on the early days of synthesizers, I think. When I say early, I mean the beginnings. And, you had folks with big boards where they literally patch things together, and that kind of, I've kind of seen that in this. I kind of understand that, I think, at least the idea there.
So the way, and the way these worked, keep in mind, so the first commercially available really good synthesizer with a keyboard, which I'm sure someone's probably saying, well, no, this one actually predated this one. But the first one I've actually been able to find was the modular Moog, which was the giant thing, which you see Keith Emerson using, like, with Emerson, like Palmer, or Powell, whichever.
Oh, sure.
So he had the big, and he had it up to the day he died, which was a great loss for music world when he passed away. But so Moog made, or Moog, however you want to put it, made the modular model 50. So was it 35, 45, and 55? I think it was the 55 was the big one.
Okay.
So then, about the year I was born in 1972, I actually think it came out in 74. I'll look that up though. Came out with the Mini Moog, which was an all-in-one synthesizer as you would know it today. In fact, they still make, or they reproduced making those again, and Moog still produces synthesizers to this day.
Sure.
Those are analog. In fact, the Moogs are one note at a time. They're single polyphony keyboard. That's it. So you only have, you hit two and you get this sliding effect between the two. So step forward about a decade after that one, and you had analog synthesizers still doing basically the same way. So you had your oscillators, then you had your filters, which would filter out. Oscillators had the ability to do more than one type of tone. They could do square wave, sine wave, triangle, and all that kind of stuff. And saw, which is the biggest one in the 1980s, of course. But they would take those, run them through filters, and then run through envelopes. So when you hit the key, it would rise and fall, volumize, and things like this. Then when this thing hit, programming this thing is compared to that. Sorry, I'm chewing on a cough drop because it's been a week. But compared to the way the original ones worked, this thing was a nightmare to program. Honestly. So the funny thing was, because it was so difficult to program compared to pretty much any other synth except maybe the Synth Clavera, which worked on the same principle. Because of that, the basic patches for this and the extra ones you could get with the cartridges were the ones used on every song. I mean, it was so comical. You hear like the E-piano sound, and it is, just iconic for the 80s because that was used all the time. But there's some other really good ones on here too. Now, the funny thing is, this thing still has some what I consider to be just, it still has just an awesome sound to it, but there's some really funny things. So at the day when this thing came out, the average synthesizer had a polyphony of 6. If you had a good one, it had 8. And I think there was a 10 out there, but that was so expensive, it's funny. The average one had 6. This thing hit the world with 16.
That's something.
So that was a huge thing. It had all the sounds you would typically want to use in the day.
Well, we're talking polyphony. When I was a kid, I wanted a keyboard, I remember. And my parents bought me a Yamaha PSS 130. I still have one. I don't have that one. There's a story behind that. I'll probably bring it in one of these days and we'll tell that story then. But the first thing I noticed when I spotted one of these was actually watching a rerun of the TV series Saved by the Bell.
Yeah.
And I recognized there's a Yamaha, but the logo, like on the DX7, is the same layout as the PSS 130 look.
Yeah.
From 1987 is probably when it's just a portable plaything almost. But
yeah.
It has dual polyphony. It's terrible. You can't even play a full chord.
Well, and not without doing some kind of really funky, weird things to do it. So Yamaha, this was the first synthesizer that I would call on its own a commercial success, especially in the world of FM, because they sold well over 100,000 of these things, probably close to 200,000. I'll have to look. I'll get that number.
That's probably large numbers for a single model, right?
Oh my, yeah. And this was then replaced with the keyboard that I had over here earlier, which was the D50, which sold a huge amount, although Roland would never tell you how many. These guys work for Roland, don't know that answer. So, and then it was replaced. So this thing basically, so here's some history real quick. So this thing from 1983 to 1987 basically ruled the keyboard world. It was on basically every album.
That's really cool.
And it was continued to be used on albums through the mid-90s for some of the sounds that it has.
You got any intros you can play for us? I know you have one because you played it earlier.
Oh, yeah. Well, like, so the...
I think we can get away with that.
Yeah, the... which I can...
Yeah, I think so. They had a little verb on it or something.
Yeah, and what they did is... Now, the one thing that this keyboard does not have, it has no effects in it. So I actually have run it through a little effects engine. So they would do something like... Take the mix up here and turn it to a little bit of Let's turn it to a little bit of room.
Mm-hmm. There it is.
It's a little low for us because I don't have the volume up really high. So now, I'll just leave that up. So this is fretless bass. This was used in the Berlin bass line for that particular sound.
Sure.
Now for the other one, go back to you can really hear that echo. Let me turn that off because that's crazy. Yeah, but you get the idea. But that was like
the danger zone now.
Oh yeah. And it was used on so many others. I mean so you have like the fretless bass and you have what was really their slap bass, but it's actually called E-Bass 1 on this particular set. Those two were used a huge amount, even up into the 90s on so many things. But I mean, here's a short list. I'll put this up on the screen, but here's a short list of the things it was used on.
Oh my goodness.
It's a very short list. But it includes groups like, what's it good one? Talking Heads, Rhino,
Elton John.
U2, yeah, Jan Hammer used it a lot. Phil Collins, Stevie Wonder, Hall & Oates, Beastie Boys.
There you go.
Kenny Loggins, which is heard. Herbie Hancock used it a lot. Toto.
Sure.
So it was used on so many things. But the
definitive 80s sound, this piece
yeah.
of equipment in front of us, really.
It defined so much of the 80s. But it still has such a great... I mean, my favorite sound, which is the E-piano sound, probably for it. Let me turn my chorus back on. It really does need some chorus. Badly needs chorus added. But that's the thing. It has no effects built in. So you just, But the same four chords over and over. Yeah, it's really is a variation on that thing. But it's used so much on. I mean, that was like the standard, de facto sounds. But this thing there's a few other things in this thing. The way this works now, looking at the algorithm and all this is really called an additive synthesizer. The only thing it does for taking sound away is the amplitude envelopes. So it's where it as it fades out. So it's just fading out, that's it. But everything else was oscillator adding to another oscillator, adding to another oscillator. For example, on this one, let me go to my functions. This used algorithm 5. So 5 is here. So it's got 3 operators and 3 modifiers to get that sound. So, and that's the kind of the really neat thing. And you can sit there and take things and turn things off and turn things back on and kind of hear the difference, which is really neat in itself. Yeah, like I said, one of the things, amazingly difficult to program. It is actually really, really hard to program. Guys did program it. And I really, so many people the engineers of the day who designed this thing are like, well, no one's ever going to program this.
Right, just use the presets.
Yeah. I really do think they meant for people to program it because they did put all this little hieroglyphics up here to really understand how to do it. And the manual does explain how. There's some great videos out there on how to program this thing, but it is a whole different way to think of things than the way it has to work, because you have to think what I want to make, go through here and figure out which algorithm, and then you have to start assigning different things. So I'll show you a picture on screen now of a virtual variation of the DX7 called DX or DXED, and you can download it for free. It's really great, but it gives you a complete layout on screen of every command and every adjustment, literally just knobs almost on screen.
That's great.
And I love that. And I'll put a picture.
Can you translate from that software to this?
Yes, you can.
Yeah.
So this thing and that save everything in what are called a sysx file.
Okay.
So you would use a cable, like the one I've got over here. You would use, this is the Roland UM1, to go from MIDI to USB. And you could upload.
MIDI, of course.
Oh, yeah. And you can upload the file to it using a program that allows that to work. And it does really, really well. And that's how
cool.
I programmed this thing, because when I got this, it did not have a backlight in the LCD screen, and it did not have the updated BIOS. And the updated BIOS fixed a major thing. So in MIDI world, when you hit a key, you should see anywhere between 0 and 127. This thing maxed it, I think it was like 100 or 110 without the BIOS update. So once you did the BIOS update, then it became a full MIDI controller, or could do it. So you've got MIDI in and out and everything else, and you got sustain pedals and all this kind of thing. It had some really neat things like breath controller. So you have a little thing you could actually blow in. The harder you blow would actually have the effect of the modulation. So yeah,
That's absurd.
yeah, but it was used a lot by different people.
Yeah, it literally has a spot that says breath controller on
Yeah,
it.
it's right here
great.
next to phone. Yeah, and you got modulation, sustain, portamento, and all that kind of stuff. So it had some other controls you could do on here as well, which are really neat. Now, the other thing I ever think about this, of course, it takes cartridges.
That's wondering what that was, a slot, isn't it?
Yeah, it's the slot for cartridge. I don't actually have cartridges. I just loaded it from the computer because I don't really change the programs that often on this thing.
Right.
The other thing is, it's honestly, I can see it. It's mono.
Oh, okay.
Oh.
Yeah.
It's not stereo out. But I think
1983.
Oh yeah, 1983.
Enough for the time.
And most keyboards were not stereo in that time. Okay, Brian Eno, which is one of the names we said a while ago, was one of the people that programmed this thing. He programmed it a lot. He did it with ambient. He did a lot of ambient music type stuff using this keyboard. Now this is programmed a lot today, but at this point you can find online thousands, literally, of patches that you can load into this thing and do so many things with.
Sure.
So the concept of this was actually developed at Stanford University by John. That was a Counting,
Counting, maybe?
Counting.
Yeah.
And then they sold the patent to Yamaha after Yamaha did a test build of a system to see if it would work. But it also has, let's see, yeah, so 61 notes, mono. It's a monotimbral keyboard, so it only does one patch at a time. Later ones, like the DX7 II, I think the DX7 II FD, which is a floppy disk drive one, could do bitimbral, so you could split the keyboard into two different sounds.
Sure.
There is a modification to this, which I believe is called gray matter, that adds that into this one. I don't have that on this, but it's one of those things I thought about, but yeah.
So that's why you see in a lot of live performances, and you actually have a setup, you just kind of took it down a little bit, but you'll have two keyboards or three sometimes stacked on top of one another.
And back in the day, it was virtually unheard of, not exclusively unheard of, but for the most part it was, to have more than one sound on a keyboard at a time. Typically it was, this was set for organ, you would have a couple of these stacked.
Sure.
You may have one that's set, so this one was set to your organ sound, and then another one was set to piano, you may have something for the fretless bass, or you may have one of my favorite sounds, a clav. This is actually a clav ensemble.
That's cool.
But the sounds that this thing produces, because of the way it works, you can do so many different sounds. What it doesn't lend itself to very well at all, and I can show you what it sounds like. I'll find it real quick. Is straight up piano. Let me turn it up. There. So it really doesn't sound
very
like a
realistic.
piano.
It doesn't sound like a piano.
But that's not really what it was designed for either. I mean,
Well, it kind of was, but not really. I mean, it was designed to give you as many.
By the early 90s, it seems like
1988
synths were
yeah,
very common that did sound like a piano.
yeah.
in 1988, Korg released the thing that basically killed this and killed its
predecessor.
the one that came after it. Anyway, so I'm drawing.
Not predecessor.
So this was replaced with the Roland D50 for the big keyboard. But Roland only had it for a year.
Really?
And then the Korg M1 came out. And the Korg M1 gave you fun sounds like you had on the D50, where you had loops and all this kind of stuff. It gave you sounds similar to this, but it gave you an actual piano. And you play it, and it sounded like a real piano. Not fake. And that really changed. That was a game changer, because at that point in the music industry, that changed so many things. It really became. There's some videos out there. I'm trying to think who did this right now. One group did it, and it's a really great video explaining, the whole history of the M1 itself. But it really became, after that, the war of the piano. Yeah. Wow. So much so that, like, on all of my more modern synthesizers, when you turn them on, patch 1 that comes up is a piano.
Right, every time.
Every time. So, but the piano on this was okay. But the E-piano, was meant to compete with a Rhodes, which a Rhodes weighs several hundred pounds, a Rhodes piano. This only weighs, it's about 47, I think. I'll put that down here, but which is still the heaviest keyboard I own.
That's heavy.
Which is really
for
funny,
something this size.
Because this weighs more than my FA08.
Basically a sack of concrete, 50-pound bag of concrete.
Oh boy, you are not kidding.
That's something. It's deceiving. At least you're like, that won't be a heavy.
It's like a metric ton. It's just where it really.
But, I mean, it was built to be able to be tossed around in road cases and stuff
like
that.
And it was absolutely made. Yeah, it was absolutely made to survive road. And it, that's metal.
Yeah.
Underneath the plastic piece, metal. This plastic piece on the outside here, which is just a shroud over metal.
Of course.
This is probably a little bit plastic, but like the bulk of this thing. That's metal. And you push this thing down, and it is, you can really hit that keyboard. And I'll see if I find that picture again and put it up there. One that guy from 9 Inch Nails just beat the tar out of this thing.
Like,
but
most of the keys are missing, but the rest of it is. I mean, it was just like, it needs new keys. That's how it was.
It literally does look like.
Somebody probably rebuilt that thing.
If you replace the key bed and you replace the pot modulation pitch wheel, because that probably got destroyed, and probably cracked the LCD, it would probably still work. Which is really funny, because you're like, he beats the tar out of the thing, but it still functions. The neat thing about this is, to get into this, you just remove these 2 screws and those 2 screws, and there's one here, and it flips up like a boat.
Oh, that's cool.
Getting into this to do work on it is amazingly easy. So this is probably still one of my favorite keyboards to play, just because, I mean, I like I like some of the 25. I like the it has so much, I mean, just, you can still use this today with modern music.
Oh, yeah.
Right.
And if you get into programming this, you'd be surprised what you can really pull out of this, because it's got some just strange sounds, like Takeoff. This is a fun one.
This is my favorite.
I was coming in to get me. I like it.
That's a fun sound, though.
It really is. And I have no idea. Like Train, this is a fun one. So it's. I have no idea why they did that, and it just keeps going too for a while.
Well, it would make a good backing track for like a rhythm section at the beginning of a song, or something like that.
Well, every guy that owns DX7 would know what it was, though.
Oh, no doubt. Well, it's like with this. Once you hear the sounds off this, you can immediately recognize that's a DX7.
Right.
And it's, some of the sounds, not all of them, a lot of them. Like some of the more absurd sounds, I have no idea why this is one of the default patches.
Ugh.
It's a ref whistle.
used in something.
It's the same on every key.
Oh, it's the same on every key. Yeah. It is. It's a ref's whistle. Is what it is.
Somebody put that there and see if anybody ever uses this.
I think so. Like there's like
I could swear I've heard that sound before as a backing
probably.
instrument.
Now, one of my favorite ones though is still, because I've used this on a lot of Christmas songs when I'm doing music here and there, because you can get that.
Oh, that is nice.
And that was used in a lot of things. It was also used in that whole, like, Run for the Border. It was used.
That sounded awfully minor. That's like the Run to the Haunted Border. Yeah. There you go.
There it is.
I have no idea.
Yeah. But it's the tube erupt, which is their tubular bell sound.
I wonder if this would have been in the era of the AC/DC track, Hell's Bells, because that has a bell at the beginning.
It might be. And
I actually don't know. I've never paid attention enough to...
I got something older in this thing.
Well, I'm not sure. It has some, like, the steel drum was... That's it. Sorry, I hit the wrong one. Everyone's going, that's not that.
What's that internet troll?
You're powerless against us.
Yeah, there you go. But some of these sounds, I don't know how to describe.
DX7.
It's very DX7.
That's what you call it.
That's actually called heavy metal. I have no idea what you'd use. But some of these sounds like I'm not, timpani.
That's a very diverse, expensive set of timpani drums.
So, some of these sounds like fretless bass was used on so many things. But like, that's supposed to be a sax. Yeah. But I don't know. I know some of these were used on other things, jazz, guitar. It's just not too bad. Yeah. But then, like harmonica. It kind of sounds like, where's SpongeBob? But
Who lifted a pineapple under the sea?
I knew one of you was going to do that.
I can't play it now, but that's clap. That clap sound, I prefer this one because it just has more bite to it. But there's E-bass. E-bass is this was the one used on it's right off. I mean, just factory patch right out of the sounds, which is
I got scales.
But this was used because it actually does sound like a little bit like a B3 in a basic way. So you could, and pipe organ.
Hallelujah.
Now you can go minor and give us a little haunted house action there.
Oh,
yeah, there we go. See how that changes the mood immediately?
I'm scared.
Yeah.
I'm going to cry.
Yeah. And it was that was sort of okay, I guess. 9 is piano. That was 8 E piano. This was used on so many things. I mean, it honestly was.
Oh man.
So the thing that I like about MIDI, and I've actually told you this before, Tim, is that like you can, with computers now and the plethora of software that's available a lot of times for free to do multi-track recording, you can, without knowing a whole lot about music, you don't have to know how to play keyboard to build music now. I mean, you can layer upon layer upon layer and lay a percussion track and then play over top of that and then do a bass backing and you've got a song.
Oh yeah. And you can do it even with GarageBand. As long as you have a Mac, it's free. I know you have to have Mac, sorry. But there are other options out there too. If you don't have a Mac and you want to use your PC, you could use like Ableton or one of those.
Right.
The software that emulates this, and there's several ones out there. FM8's another one, so big ones. You pay for that one. But the Dex or DX7 is free, and you can use it as a VST or a virtual synthesizer with some of that software.
Okay.
So you can use the patches right off the DX7 and never actually own a DX7.
Right.
Now, I don't think they sound quite the same, but they're really close.
Mm-hmm.
And I've used that live a few times, and that's kind of fun because I have that with my I do have a Mac. Sorry,
Yeah, I know.
but yeah, but
He's a little.
so I'll use because I'll do stuff live. Well, yeah, yeah. So I'll use Mainstage Live, which is a live synthesizer software for the Mac, and it's really cheap too. It's like $35 or $36, not a lot. And I'll have that set up to where it's got a stacked amount of stuff, and I'll have it, on a slider there. I can just adjust whatever I want to bring in. And I can use any keyboard with it using that one same cable. Just take MIDI out, which is actually here, and to the laptop and have the laptop being limited. So I can actually make the DX7 using this as a controller. I can actually make it have pianos and everything else that are real pianos. And there's a lot of other software out there too that for that kind of stuff. But
With software, you actually can do more than one sound at
oh,
once.
absolutely, yeah, absolutely. I do. Usually, I do up to 6, and that's mainly because, or 7, because I use the. Or no, it's actually 8. I'm sorry. I use the. What is that thing? The Korg. Nano control, something like that. So it's just this little slider volume control unit that Korg makes. And I use it to control, and I have each sound on that slider, and I can bring in and out whatever I need to for whatever song we want to play. But
Nice.
that's the DX7, and like I said, it's
Spectacular.
It
is cool. That's what I'd be playing with all the time.
yeah.
So what did you use to build our theme music?
Actually, GarageBand.
GarageBand. Okay.
I think he needs to rebuild our theme music with the DX7 at some point.
I'm-
That would make layers of DX7 madness. Is that our theme music now? No.
It could be. Yeah, I could definitely do that. I've got
When he's played it, he plays it like he's played a slap bass.
Oh, yeah, I
It
know.
sounds like
He
in his
really
head.
gets them.
because I like that. Because if you don't, you just get
Yeah, what fun is that?
yeah. And the other thing this does have is Aftertouch. Although I don't really have it set to do anything right now, but Aftertouch is one of those things which, if you don't know what that is, because a lot of keepers don't have it, is when you play
I don't know what it is.
and you push harder, it then does something else.
Oh, that's cool.
It kind of works like the modulation wheel. So if you have, which I need to go ahead and set that because I've turned it off. 'Cause that would be a good thing to
I
do.
didn't think it did anything.
I was just there for looks.
Aftertouch,
a
did
DX7
modulation
expert
wheel. So let's do
That don't work.
range. And
I appreciate anything that has a slider that just says data. That's
yeah,
that's
there's
pleasing
only,
to me.
Yeah, and that's the funny thing. There's only 2 knobs or 2 sliders on this thing: volume control and data entry.
Ooh,
Yeah,
that's cool.
so that's what that does. So if you could do the same thing with Aftertouch, I could go in here and I could set Aftertouch range to full, and I set pitch to on. And go,
Oh wow, yeah.
yeah,
Definitely could
and
be
that
useful.
actually works. And some people like Aftertouch, some people don't. Some people intentionally go and shut it off, and they'll use a foot pedal, or they'll just use a modulation
Right.
because it is a little
Have
bit
that
more.
type of control.
Right.
Yeah, because if you play this, you can kind of fade that effect out. Whereas
Sure.
if you're doing this,
Yeah, it's kind of just got
it's
one
not
setting.
as
Yeah.
it's not as accurate.
And everybody has their preference. It's just like I was telling you earlier, I don't really like the velocity sensing.
Yeah, and if you want to turn off, if you're doing like piano, you would want to keep that. If you're doing like just synth sounds, for example, so if you were doing where's that one? Synth lead, there it is. You may not want to have, you may want to hit hard every time, or set the level it hits every time. Which I probably wouldn't use that sound because I don't really like that one that much. But anyway, yeah, you could definitely do that. Back that, So if you want to do something where you just want to be a play, but you want to get that,
Without having to bash your keyboard every time.
yeah,
Okay.
you have to get out the baseball bat. That's what that one guy did. He was just trying to get louder sound out of it.
That,
Yeah. I don't know why someone likes to break keyboards. To like that.
It's sacrilegious.
It hurts your feelings, doesn't it?
Yeah, I mean, like it's like it's like the
Justin
term,
and I promise we're not going to throw this
Yeah,
on Tim
yeah,
and start
please
stomping
don't.
on it in front of you.
Oh my gosh, it's about
Never
like
seen Nathan cry, but that might do it. Yeah.
He would.
Then he'd kill us.
Oh my, yeah. I mean, it's like one of those things that you just it's like when you drop your phone, you're like, oh God, what just broke? But that's why I put an OtterBox on mine because
Right.
I do that occasionally.
Be an expensive OtterBox for this.
Big plastic.
It kind of is an OtterBox in itself, though.
Yeah, they just built it to where it just won't break.
Back when they
that
still
easy.
built things that wouldn't break when you
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, and this is back in the day when they built keyboards. I mean, you paid $2,000 for this thing when it came out.
Which that was 1983, $2,000.
Yeah, 1983, $2,000. So it's more like 4 or 5 now.
Right.
So you paid money. You treated this thing with some care, as much as you could. And mine's actually in really good condition. It's got a couple little minor spots here and there. There's a little crack in the back here, but it's nothing in the little plastic pieces. The metal, though, is just,
Sure.
and the key bed itself. Yeah. It sounds terrible when you're playing that because you just get that droning sound. Let's go back to like E piano.
There you go.
It's much more mellow.
Well, that's good stuff.
Yep. So that's the
Except
DX7.
I guess that's
in a
all we've
nutshell.
got, huh? All right.
That's the DX7 in a nutshell.
Well,
All right.
Let me get it out of the way here.
until next time, who are you?
I'm Justin.
I would be Nathan.
I'm Timmy. Just say no to drugs. This is 3 Old Tech Dudes.
See you later.
See ya.
Let's see it.